Some of my fondest childhood memories take place around the Seder table. It was a night that encouraged questions, that encouraged participation, that encouraged play and engagement from even the youngest child, which I tended to be around the table. And one of my favorite moments was when we would get to the reading of the questions of the four children. And my father would look around the room very slowly, very methodically, and he would choose among us which would represent the wise child's question that day, the rebellious or wicked child's question that day, and the simple child's question. And each of us secretly hoping for whatever child we had related to in that moment. Often for me, it tended to be the rebellious one. But as I got older, I started to become more and more uncomfortable with how the children were being characterized and how the children were being boxed into these very specific personality types just based on a question that they asked, and the very fact that the characterization of them and their question didn't feel accurate to me. So I wanted to take a moment to try to reframe these children and in general talk about the importance of questions and how we respond to them. So the first child, the wise child, asks a question about the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws that God has commanded us, what they are. And we've decided to call this wise. But instead of focusing on trying to characterize the child, what if instead we looked at the question and tried to understand what their learning style is? So I look at this child so focused on information and facts, history and data, and I think this child is a data-driven learning style. This child is interested in the facts and the figures, and that's how they best learn and understand. The second child, the so-called wicked child, asks this question: what does this mean to you? And in the great injustices that we see around our Seder table, this to me is the biggest, because this child actually asks a deeply empathic question. This child wants to know what this means to their parents and to the adults and others around the table before they can begin to understand what it means for themselves. So this child is displaying an empathic learning style. The so-called simple child asks probably the most complicated question of all, the ultimate meta question of what is this? That's no simple question. That child has a more philosophical learning style, trying to understand the bigger, deeper questions and the meanings behind things. And finally, that last child, the one we claim doesn't know how to ask, could just be a child that is more observant, the child that steps back and watches and listens and observes all around them in order to help learn and to help process. So instead of using this section of the four children to further pigeonhole and pass judgment on these children, what if we used it as an opportunity to make our Seder experience more inclusive to all learning styles and use it as an opportunity to look at our children as teachers and not just learners, as those who can contribute and not just receive. I'd like to end by asking two questions. The first is, which type of learner are you? And what learning style are you bringing to the Seder table? The second question is, how will you make sure your Seder is as inclusive as possible to all learning styles so that everyone feels encouraged, everyone feels engaged, and everyone around your table feels celebrated?